Okay, good evening, everybody. We will call this regular meeting of the Fargo School Board to order, as regular as they can seem, because this is our first virtual meeting, so I thank you in advance for your patience. And if any board members would like to be called upon, please raise your hand. I think that's the best option since I can see all of you. We do have an agenda, at least I have an agenda in front of myself. I would entertain a motion to approve that. Jim?
Robin, I move that we approve the agenda with the HR addendum added under item 4C.
Okay. Christy, second. Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, all those in favor, please vote by saying yes, and let's raise our hands while we say yes.
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 Yeah.
Okay, any opposed? No. Okay, we will proceed with the agenda as written. Staff reports. Ms. Mastrud is on the screen here. Welcome, Jennifer. How are you?
Great, thanks, Robin. So a little bit of a staff report for you guys from FEA. First, I want to reach out and say thank you to the board members, Brandy Ani, John Rodenbiker, and Robin Nelson for reaching out over these last few weeks. Robin, I do apologize for not responding to your email earlier, but I wanted everyone to hear the response as to how this new school normal is going for us. Though there's definitely been challenges with distance learning, there have also been a lot of success stories. Staff and FEA members are doing a fantastic work, from helping kids get meals, checking in on vulnerable families, sanitizing the buildings, and of course, finally educating our youth's minds still as we go through this pandemic. I'm truly proud of this FPS family in seeing how important and vital every single role is within our community. So the students that have been engaging in distance learning have expressed joys of our learning from home, as they have found the distractions of the learning environment are an asset that they don't have to deal with in their homes, while others are extremely sad and miss school with those social aspects. So we truly know that this time is an experiment as we go through an education, and we can see how resilient these kids are going to be, as we cannot replace our real life learning setting. We know what a valuable experience we are offering the students during this time in order to try to keep it as normal as possible. So I've personally been staying up to date from DPI, Governor Burgum, state leaders, our AFL-CIO, NDU, local governments, and of course our very own cabinet. The information has been very overwhelming at times, as many of you have probably felt the exact same way. And I am so excited to be able to share this at this time that our cabinet has been extremely compassionate. Every single chance I get, I'm trying to share with them how dedicated they are and how staff are appreciating that. We are honestly seeing them lead with their hearts, and they are thinking of all the people involved in this process. I would also like to take this time to express the relief that many of our employees felt when the school board made the vote to continue to pay all staff through this time. So many of our staff are now relying on this single income, as many of their family members or partners have been laid off. So this goes to show how much you value your staff in Fargo Public Schools. But as we look at the agenda tonight, we see that there is a vote on a potential new school. I understand you want to conduct business as normal during this pandemic, and that the public not having access to this meeting to speak, do you think it's the best time to conduct such an important decision? Transparency has been a key rubbing point with our community and staff over the last few years. Roughly a $60 million building decision held on virtual meeting. Is this the decision that you will have to make to show your guys' leadership? Please know, if and when you make the vote, FEA is still very concerned. You talk about the tight budgets, the deficit spending. We know that the building a new budget will take many dollars from the general fund to pay for necessities like the people in the buildings. You simply have stated you can't afford the staff that you have through these negotiation talks the last 3 years. This message you are sending to the community and to your staff is very contradictory. Looking ahead, we also know that there's going to be a very important vote for our community to review. That's that mill levy vote that's going to be happening in 6 to 7 years. Though I personally feel it's very important that school districts be able to build buildings when they need them, I also feel it has to be absolutely necessary. Our community deserves a strong voice in crafting that timeline and deserves to be heard. We ask that we take pause and reflect on what is best in the here and now, what is best for students, what is best for the health of our district, what is best for the future of Fargo as a whole. Your actions and decisions will send a ripple through the community, as I know they are watching your actions closely tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, President Mastrud. Superintendent report, Dr. Gandhi.
Good evening, board members. Just wanted to provide a few quick updates on the last couple of weeks and where we are. I think I'll start with just nutrition services. I know that's been a conversation since we've switched to online learning, and I've gotten some board member inquiries as well. I wanted to first, just by starting with our entire business services department and then our nutrition services department. They've done a phenomenal job of just making sure that our first priority, as soon as we knew that students weren't going to be into our buildings, was to make sure that our students are fed. We continue to adapt and change our process on a week-to-week basis based on the need and the demand for our community, but then also on the level of threat with COVID-19. So you may have seen that this past week we adjusted to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, and part of that is to get on a more consistent rotation and limit the exposure of new staff as well. Following CDC guidelines, we're also making sure that our nutrition staff workers are all masked and have gloves and are all following the appropriate social distancing guidelines as well. So as of last week, we were averaging about 1,300 breakfast and lunch meals a day. I know the last couple of days we've been north of 1,500 and 1,400 as well. So we're continuing to see success with our program, and we're continuing to develop and provide more meals for as many people as we can while trying to minimize our staff exposure. So it is a huge burden on Cindy and her entire team, but I know that she's supported by her entire business service department. So just wanted to commend them for the work that they're doing. Second piece, for those of you that did have the opportunity to join us this afternoon at 1 o'clock on Facebook Live, we got to make a very special announcement, and that was announced our Fargo Public Schools Teacher of the Year. Kimmy Milligan is a student performance strategist at Eagles Elementary School, and we had the opportunity to, fortunately with the support of her family, surprise her on her front lawn at her home. I do want to acknowledge our IT department, our communications department, and Marie specifically for still being able to find a way to acknowledge our staff member. But most importantly, I just want to say thank you to Kimmy. If you've ever had a chance to see her in action, there is no question as why she was deserving of this award, and just the amount of nominations that we received and the quality and depth of the services she provides our kids and the way she touches the lives of our family is phenomenal, and why she was so deserving of the award today. Lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about distance learning. We are, a couple weeks in. There are a couple of really important things for us to know is that our distance learning program, we expect it to be adaptable and flexible. It was put together in a 2-week short period. And I appreciate the comments from FEA today as well. And I also appreciate the comments that we've received from our superintendent student cabinet group that we met with last week. They're continuing to give feedback. And for the most part, although we've heard different challenges here and there, whether they range from rigor or accessibility, overall, the feedback's been very positive. And that really is an exemplification of our teachers, our staff members, and the amount of work that we're doing. So distance learning is going really well in Fargo Public Schools. We continue to make tweaks and adjustments to provide those individualized needs as we can. But like Jennifer also said, we know that this almost forces us into a situation to provide a one-size-fits-all instructional model. And that's not an ideal model. And it's important for us to acknowledge that we are not trying to replicate or duplicate instruction as if students were in our building. We just know that we can't do that. We're trying to provide the best education we can under these circumstances. And we have feedback from family members that are at the elementary level saying that we don't have the opportunity or the time to get through the boards. And then we have feedback from other staff members who are saying, my child is able to complete these assignments in 5 minutes. So we're going to continue working on our plan, but really try to see how can we provide the best environment for everyone. It's also important for our community and our board members and everyone else to know that we also have a wide variety of learning environments that are not just different for our students, but for our teachers as well. Several of our teachers, several of our staff members are also young parents, or they might have multiple children that they are also watching for at home. And we're continuing to put expectations on them for teaching a class or doing office hours. And while they're passionate and dedicated, they also have family obligations during this time as well, and making sure that they're looking after their kids. So I just want to acknowledge our staff and say that you guys are doing a wonderful job. Lastly, I really want to commend Bill and our IT department. Switching to distance learning has put a lot of work onto our IT department, and the amount of work that they do behind the scenes is beyond amazing. Not only did they make sure that we were able to switch to distance learning in a 2-week period, allow our high school staff to use the flexibility of whatever LMS that they want to do, come up with a consistent model for middle school. They are also working on making sure that we're providing all of our families with the access that they need, while making sure that all of this just works. Some of the things that we may not consider, that's not talked about often, switching to distance learning, is we have a limited amount of IT equipment that we budget for year after year. Our supply chain for replacement equipment is based out of China. So at this time, also that's going to be delayed. So managing how do you allocate resources and still provide access for all of our students and families is important. They've done a great job of that. I know there's also been a lot of conversation in the media around Zoom and that as a platform. And I think I just want to address a couple of things. We as Fargo Public Schools, even for this board meeting, we are using Zoom. And the reason that we had made the decision to use Zoom is because when we had to decide to switch to distance learning very quickly, Bill and the IT team tried out Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and other platforms on all of our student devices and said, what works? And at that time, Zoom was the most successful and seamless piece. We know that Zoom's gotten a lot of attention because it's one of the most popular platforms in terms of security threats. Him and his team have been continuously on top of that to address any concerns, and there haven't been many concerns since implementation. We know that Zoom has since then upgraded their own security features as well. We are encouraging our staff members to record sessions as well if that's going to help with any potential concerns, but also know that our IT department has a plan B. And with some changes in being able to compress data, Microsoft Teams might be an option that they can work with, and they're going to continue to work on that and make the adjustments necessary as well. So that's one of the reasons why we as a district are using Zoom, but it's important to know that in the first couple of weeks, it hasn't been a concern for us, and it has worked pretty seamlessly, and we've gotten good feedback from our teachers and from our students as well. So I just wanted to end by acknowledging Bill and our IT team and just saying across the board, we have an incredible staff, and thank you to all of them for making sure that we are able to provide a meaningful learning experience for our students.
Robin, you're on mute.
Okay. Still working on the phone piece. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for that great report. It's been a ride these last couple of weeks, and I appreciate all the technology as well, and the work behind the scenes, and our staff is incredible. They really are. Thank you for all that you do. We do have a consent agenda in front of us with an HR addendum. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So that agenda items are on the floor. Any discussion on any of those? All those in favor, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. Those items have been approved. Thank you. Item 5A in the business section, the long-range facility planning, new school in South Fargo. The order of discussion tonight, Dr. Gandhi would like to share a little bit of history, and staff share some reports. And then maybe we can move to Christy and she can make introductions from the planning committee and bring it to the floor for discussion. So I will turn it over to Dr. Gandhi and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I'm just going to start with providing a brief history of where we are. and how we got to this agenda item for the board to consider today. And then I'll hand it over to Dr. Gross. He's going to screen share and provide some greater context as well. I think it's important to note that this conversation started July of 2017, even prior to my time in Fargo Public Schools, when there was a conversation around what are we going to do with increasing enrollment on the south side of town. In all of the initial conversations, the initial proposals were always around boundary changes, changing attendance boundaries. And in fact, when that conversation progressed from July 2017 to several subsequent work sessions afterwards, and when I did start in my role, one of the most important things that we were tasked to do was conduct a task force and provide recommendations to the board on exploring boundary changes to alleviate some of the enrollment growth concerns that we have. At that time, the numbers that we were using, all of our projections, even to this day, are based off of RSP's projection. And we know that we do their enrollment, and their enrollment reports are coming 5 years in advance. And we know that their accuracy is more accurate the closer you are to the time of the projection. Regardless of whether you look at their accuracy from 5 years out at 94% to 1 year out, with it's 99 point something percent, what you will see is a continuous increase in enrollment on the south side of town. And one of the things that Dr. Gross will outline is that Davies and Discovery continue to show more and more students. So for that reason, we had gone to a task force last year and really took a look at boundary changes based on the guiding principles that the board had approved in the long range facilities plan. At that time, to determine the amount of students that can fit into a building, we used capacity. And capacity prior to 2017 in Fargo Public Schools was just defined on a formula that based on the X amount of square footage that you have in a building, this is how many kids you can fit in, a standard formula. In 2017, at that time, Dr. Gross and Dr. Agri walked all of our buildings and determined a new capacity. And that capacity took into account specialized programs, independent small group learning spaces, team areas, just different spaces that won't necessarily allow themselves to be used for a classroom space. And you can't capture that when you are looking at solely the square footage of a building. So keeping that in mind, going off of capacity as that standard, we started a task force, and we started the task force to redraw attendance boundaries and take a look at what could these situations look like. Well, there's a couple of things that really came out when we presented to the board. When we presented the top 2 recommendations from that task force for boundary changes, we realized that it wasn't as simple as just changing boundaries. So you can get more kids for example, South High School instead of Davies. We realized that one of the things that would happen is that it'd be a 2-step boundary change. A reason for that is Carl Ben Allison Middle School is one of our smallest middle schools in terms of physical space, but then it feeds into South High School, which is one of our largest schools in terms of physical space. So in order to do boundary changes and make some changes where we wouldn't have to build a new building, a couple of things would happen. We would not only have to shift students in the Discovery attendance area to Carl Ben Allison, but then to free up some more room, we'd have to shift students from Carl Ben Allison up to Ben Franklin Middle School. That will result in some of the students traveling further or even past their closest neighborhood school, going to the next school. The other thing that would be a consideration if we go forward with boundary changes is that we would have to split up students. So we wouldn't be able to keep cohorts of secondary students together. For example, Discovery's 8th graders, some of those group of 8th graders may have to go to a South High School, whereas others would have to go to Davies. And these were part of the recommendations that we had presented to the board to alleviate some of the enrollment concerns. At that time, at that work session, the board asked administration to go back and explore another option that wouldn't backfill Ben Franklin or North High School, meaning that wouldn't allow a 2-step boundary change. Explore options that would keep secondary cohorts of students together. And the board also told us at that time, although South High School is built to have north of 1,500 students, we don't want the school to be that large. So based off of those parameters, at that work session, we have come back to the board and taken those guiding principles, which some of you adopted in the long range facilities plan, and said, well, the only other way to meet some of these criteria would be requiring building a new building. Now, building that new building would have to open as an 8th, 9th grade center because the concern for enrollment is both at Discovery Middle School and Davies High School. And then it would have to change to a full middle school down the road. That is based on the guidance that the board gave us of having a long-term vision of having 4 middle schools that feed into 4 high schools. Boundaries are still on the table as an option, but the considerations are some of those things that you had told us to explore in the board work session, which I mentioned. So that has kind of led us to the recommendation that we are bringing today based on the guidance that's given us to as board. As administration, our biggest priority is just to know what the long-term vision for the Fargo School Board is. We know that we are going to be able to serve our kids, and we know that we have incredible staff to be able to serve the kids. But at the same point, we also need to be able to answer to say, what is our plan to address the continual growth on the south side of town when we have a linear city? And what is that going to look like if we continue to show more growth on the south side of town? And that's what the trend is showing. So really, that's what our ask is of the board. I will hand it over to Dr. Gross to go a little bit further.
Well, thank you very much. What I'd like to do today is just share with you some information to provide some context and some data around what Dr. Gandhi was just discussing with you. And the first set of data that I'd like to share with you looks at that feeder system that was mentioned and what that could or should look like if we went with a 4 middle school and 4 comprehensive high schools. We would have our 5th high school of Woodrow Wilson, but this would be 4 comprehensive high schools. So to do that, I have shared a similar report with you in the past. This is just to hopefully give you some of the context for your conversations tonight. The other thing I want to share with you is a review of why we need to look at the south side of Fargo. So on the screen in front of you, I'm hoping is a chart that shows the enrollment at Discovery Middle School. And what that is, it shows over the past 9 years, the enrollment trend. So on this chart, you can see back in 2011-12 is the blue line on the chart. And it just plots for you opening day attendance at that facility. And then each month, what the number of students were at Discovery. Then from there, we've added a series of lines, one for each of the school years that came after that. So the 2012-13 data is provided in the orange line, and you can see between those 2 years, the enrollment did increase at Discovery. And then we continue to add a line for each of the next school years, 2013-14, 14-15, 15-16, which is the blue line here. And then in 2016-17, there was a series of boundary changes that were put into place, put into practice. And what you'll notice is that next school year, which would be 16-17, there was actually a decrease in the number of students at Discovery Middle School. So the boundary changes did exactly what they intended to do, which was to reduce the number of students in that facility. And then as the next series of years progressed, 17-18, 18-19, you can see each year after that, we have increased in the number of students at Discovery Middle School. On the chart that's in front of you, there is one last data point that would be for our last month of this school year that is not there. So this is not a complete year, but certainly you can see the number of students and how the number of students at Discovery has increased year after year. The next set of data I'd like to share with you is a very similar look. So I will not take the same amount of time to go over it with you, but a similar look at the number of students at Davies High School. The same colors are associated with the different school years, starting with 2011-12 in blue. And then you can see as each year is added to the chart, the number of students continually increases. The dashed line is that same year that boundary changes took effect. You will notice that they were not as dramatic as they were at Discovery. And the reason for that is there was purposeful grandfathering of the students who were in Davies High School at that time. If they started their academic career there, we said a family should end their academic career there, or a student should. It was the students who had not yet attended the high school that would be impacted later on. And then from there, you can see year after year, even with those boundary changes, we are continuing to add students to Davies High School. So that's kind of the context for, or to show a picture of that growth on the south side of our community. The next piece of data I'd like to share with you just gives a little bit more information about the true feeder system and the impact that that has on what Dr. Gandhi mentioned around capacity. So in the Fargo Public Schools, this happens to be our current boundaries for our middle schools and high schools. And if we then laid on the top of that, where our different schools are located, I tried to pull them out with a little bit bigger icon so it's easier to see where they're physically located in our community. But over on the right-hand side of that screen, you'll see a chart that lists our different secondary buildings, the capacity that we started the conversation around, and that was based upon what Dr. Gandhi mentioned, where multiple years ago, as we went through the building and said which of the classrooms are available for true classroom spaces, which ones are there for our ancillary spaces and so on, we basically multiplied the number of classroom spaces by what's in the long-range facility plan, 26 students per classroom, to come up with that capacity number. Now, there were a few variations in that. For example, if during that walkthrough, we found that a science classroom only had 24 science stations, lab stations, the capacity of that room was indicated as 24 and not 26. And there were a few other instances in that case, but we got a better understanding of what the capacity is just based on number of rooms and using 26, which is in our long range plan, the number of students in each of those classrooms. And then over to the right of that, this was the number of students in each of those facilities at the beginning of the school year. Then, as we had the conversation around a true feeder system, where all of the students, for example, from Carl Ben Eielson would attend Fargo South, or all of the students at Ben Franklin would go to North High School. The idea was, what if then in the future, the long-range secondary school configuration plan was one more middle school and one more high school? The new middle school then would feed Davies High School, and that new high school would be fed by Discovery Middle School. What impact would that have on the capacity of those buildings? And you'll notice that on the chart now on the right-hand side of the screen, there are some numbers in red, and that was the numbers that we suggested and was approved on truly what the new capacity of those buildings should be based upon the school it either feeds or the school that is being fed by another building. Because the size of the building impacts the capacity of the next building or the building before it, just because there are only so many spaces for students in a true feeder system. So to share an example of that, this is how we looked at if Carl Ben Eielson was a true feeder to Fargo South, And that's, you'll see the capacity at Fargo South was updated to 1,112. That was based upon the fact that Carl Ben Eielson, it being the smaller of the two buildings, its capacity is 835 students. And in a perfect world, we have 3 grade levels there. And we said each grade level is the exact same number of students. So 835 divided by 3. We would say each grade level would be 278 students. Now we know that that doesn't happen, where sometimes one grade level will be larger, one will be a little bit smaller, just based upon our community. But for capacity, we said, let's divide the capacity of Carl Ben Eielson by 3, get that 278, and now that South High School has 1 more grade level, multiply that 278 by 4, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and our seniors, to come up with that capacity of 1,112. If we then compare that to just the capacity of the building, just number of classrooms multiplied by 26, you see that we do then, or would have, extra capacity at Fargo South High School. That's where down the road, the conversation would be, if this was to become the reality, what would we do with that extra capacity at Fargo South High School? This is just a beginning list of things it could be, and none of them have been determined that that would be what it should be. Everything from an early college where students had the opportunity to earn additional college credits, potentially more CTE space, an immersion program for a language, a STEAM academy, more room for ECSE, multiple opportunities to use that capacity at Fargo South based upon that feeder system. Then, if a new middle school was built to feed Davies High School, what should that capacity of the middle school be? Well, this time we started with how big Davies is and worked backwards. Davies High School being built for the capacity of 1,350. If you divide that by 4 and say in a perfect world, each of those grade levels is equal, you'd have 337 students. You now multiply that by 3, 1 for 6th, 1 for 7th, and 1 for 8th, and you would see the target capacity for a new middle school would be 1,011. And then if this long-range plan became a reality, and down the road, multiple years, another high school was needed, how large could or should that be? Well, that would be starting with that capacity of Discovery, or starting with a building the same size as Davies High School. And in either way, you would see that that building could be built at 1,350 students, and Discovery then would be able to house about 1,011. Same math, just worked in reverse orders. And then finally, just so that we look at our entire system, under a true feeder system for Ben Franklin feeding Fargo North, starting with Fargo North being at capacity of about 1,200 students, divide that by 4, how many students in each of those grade levels, multiply that by 3, again for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and the capacity of Ben Franklin would be truly closer to about 900 students. So again, like Fargo South High School, there would be some capacity and some room for additional programming potentially down the road at Ben Franklin Middle School if this became the reality. So then that would look at that long-range configuration for our secondary schools. The chart on the graph on the right show those new capacities based upon a true feeder system. And then lastly, the piece that we talked about is if a new building was created, like Dr. Gandhi mentioned, and it started out as an 8th and 9th grade center, so that the 8th grade students from Discovery and the 9th grade students from Davies would start there to address the continued growing enrollment on the south side of town, how long would it be until we potentially may need to build then that fourth high school? Well, according to the long-range facility plan, it says that our system would build that next building when approximately 50% of the students are there, ready for it to be built. So I think the targets then would be, under this scenario, when Discovery's attendance area, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders got to a number of about 1,517, which would be the capacity of Discovery plus the additional half of its capacity, or the attendance at Davies High School got to 2,025, the capacity of Davies High School at 1,350, and half of that capacity. That might then be the time to have those conversations of when that could or should be built. So the data I started with looked at why and the growth in the south part of town. The second set of data I shared with you looked at the information on that feeder system. The last piece of data I wanted to share with you so that you could have conversations tonight would be to look at what would this do with our current students on the south side of town. So on the screen in front of you is a lot of data, but what it is in February, near the end of the month, we ran a report and said, count all of the kindergarten students who are in the Discovery or Davies High School attendance area. And we found in this cell, C2, there are 385 current kindergartners who live in that Davies Discovery attendance area. We ran another report for first grade and second and third. So this column, C, is the current number of students living in that Discovery Davies attendance area by grade level. The reason we ran that data was to begin to say, okay, what does this look like in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years based upon those buildings? So in the pink that's on the screen in front of you, you'll see for the 2020-21 school year, next year, if we took this year's 5th, 6th, and 7th grade students, added the number together, that would be 1,100. Now, this does not factor in any students who may move into our district or move out of our district. It's just the current number of students at that time. In 2021-22, this is now the current 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. In 2022-23, it's current 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and so on. So we're trying to see currently what are those numbers of students who would be at that facility. Then in row 18, did the exact same thing, but now for the students at the high school. So in 2021, this 1,302 is basically the addition of our current 8th graders, current 9th, current 10th, and 11th graders aggregated together. And then just like I did for the middle school, tried to walk out as far as I could, combining those grade levels together. The reason I did that was to finally say, if a new building was created and it housed 8th and 9th grade students, how many students might be in that building? How many students might be in Discovery Middle School if it was 6th and 7th? And how many students would be at Davies High School if they were 10th, 11th, or 12th grade? So in this set of data from rows 22 through 27, it basically just adds together for 2021, our current 5th and 6th graders, move them forward a year. So you would see that that building would have approximately 715 students. In the new building, if it was there next year, there'd be 727 8th and 9th graders. And at Davies High School, there'd be 960 students. And then projected that out as far as we could. And we had to stop at 2026, 27, because that year, actually, if moving forward, that would be current preschoolers, current kindergartners, and for current first graders. And we don't have the number of preschoolers across our entire system in the Davies Discovery area. So that's as far as that data would go. But just to give you a sense of the size of those buildings based upon our current students. The last thing I'd like to share is the question might come, well, we know that that is an area of town that is growing. And what is the typical growth rate in that part of our community? Well, over the last 8 years, on average, both Davies or Discovery, over some ups and downs, but on average, each year they've grown about 2.5% when it comes to the number of students who are in the school. So I ran data, if we then increased it by 1%, 2%, or getting close to that 2.5% to see what that might be based upon an average increase in the number of students in that catchment area on the south part of town. So the numbers vary, not dramatically, but by about 15 students in the 6th and 7th band, by approximately 20 in the 8th and 9th band, and by about 24 students at that high school band. But at least we have some predictions on past history and current students in the Fargo Public Schools. So that was a lot of data, but just wanted to give you some information for your conversations around the reason why, what that enrollment is, and where we're at.
Robin, can I ask Bob a question? Bob, can you hear me, Bob?
Yes.
That last set of data where you looked at the kindergartners in the Discovery Davies attendance area, catchment area, and moved them forward, have you by chance done that same thing with the South CBE catchment areas and the North Bend Franklin catchment areas to see what those student populations are projected to do based on our current kindergartners in the feeder systems?
I have not run that at this time, but certainly could do that and get that information to you.
Is that a lot of work?
During our current situation, sometimes there is more time to do projects like that. So I certainly could do that.
I just think it would be helpful because one of the pieces that I think we're all aware of is we want to maintain enough students at both North and South to have comparable education quality. And I just would like to know what, if we don't change boundaries, if we instead choose to build, what does that look like for South and North going forward?
I will certainly do that. And I will run that using the same time period so that we're comparing similar sets of data.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Gross? Dr. Gandhi, is there anybody else that wants to present on this before the board discusses it?
Yeah, I think we're just going to hand it over to Jackie to talk a little bit about when the board asked us to explore this option, what administration identified as potential funding mechanisms for the project.
Perfect.
Good evening, everyone. Nope, do you want to go ahead?
David?
I just had the question that Jim just asked, I think is a very relevant one because we're seeing rapid growth in the south end, but we're not seeing any growth in the north end. And I'd be very, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to bring north up to capacity. We're about 300 under capacity now if we don't redraw the lines. And how are we going to maintain the same degree of rigor in our curriculum if we don't have the students up there? And if we find, as these years go forward, that the enrollment in North is falling even further, that's information I'd really like to know before I'm voting on a new school.
Point well taken, David. Thank you.
Can I ask a
And I
question
would,
about?
sure,
Sorry,
go
Rob.
ahead, Jennifer.
My question would be then directed back to Dr. Rupak Gandhi, because I was writing down those numbers, wondering when you talked about shifting and addressing those capacity numbers, would then children need to go past the school to get to the other, to fill up currently?
Correct.
Yeah.
Off the recommendations, I don't remember all of the scenarios. I think there were 13 scenarios that we went through at a work session, and there was
Yeah,
2 identified by the task force. I don't remember them all
Yeah.
off the top of my head, but there were some. One of the concerns expressed by board members at that work session was around, is it going to have kids go past one school to get to the other? Essentially, I think the term that was used at that time was backfilling. And it would require that. And I think we also did have a conversation around where would we want target numbers to be at for North or South? I think it's a very legitimate question to ask. What is their future enrollment going to look like? Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gross. I think at that work session, we said as long as we don't anticipate any programming changes to North or South unless their enrollment drops. I forgot what that number was, but we didn't feel like we're close to that threshold, but I think we can definitely do the analysis.
thank you.
I would add too, a lot of people are asking, why don't you just add on to Davies or Discovery? And I want to remind everybody that's listening, the reason we built Davies is because the class sizes got so large at South High. And I, as a single board member, don't want our classes to get that large. So adding on for me is something that I wouldn't support because I want to keep those graduating class sizes smaller. I remember a class size of 582 graduating the last big class at South High. So the whole purpose of Davies was to keep those graduating class sizes smaller. And then that trickles back down into the feeder systems that Dr. Gross was talking about. Any other questions before Jackie presents, gang?
Robin, I'd just like to add something onto what you've just said. I think in the best interest of the kids and teachers at both Discovery and Davies, to keep those class sizes lower even there. I mean, I think that's really critical. We want to be able to provide the opportunities for those children at those 2 schools as well.
Thank you. Okay, I hear nobody else. So Jackie, do you want to take over?
I sure will. Just to give you a little background information or some reminders on how we would anticipate paying for this project should you choose to go forward with it. We did build this potential middle school into our long-range financial plan that we have recently updated just this past winter. And the building fund does have the capacity currently to issue bonds to cover the costs of this project. And the costs are included as part of the memo. So just wanted to let you know that is how we would anticipate paying for it, and to give you that reminder as you have your discussions further.
Jackie, are there any estimates on operational costs if we were to move forward with building this additional school?
You know, just basing it roughly on what Discovery is for the main operating, which to me would be, you know, your maintenance and operations side, as well as probably the administrative and office side. So not anything with the instructional side. That would be about 1.6 million a year now. And then we'd have to factor in the other costs of any additional, support staff that wouldn't maybe transfer over with the number of kids, because some of those staff would already be on serving the kids in the buildings that at Discovery and Davies now.
Go ahead,
So,
Brian.
Jackie, how much costs for teachers?
I don't have the number for the teaching staff. Robin asked on operational, so it was just operational. I think teaching staff, some are already, would at the time that this would open, would already be on staff serving the kids at Discovery and Davies. So I'd have to look at further to see what the potential additional staff would be from that instruction side and maybe para support side.
Robin,
Go ahead.
Jackie, this $1.6 million in operational, that would have to come out of the general fund. We're no longer talking building fund there, are we? That's correct. And we're operating this year with what looks like a deficit budget. Do we have projected increased revenue so that by the time that building is up and functioning, we're going to be able to fund it? We have a lot of hard decisions currently to make, even for next year. So in short, to answer your question, there would need to be a lot of discussion on what that would look like going forward.
Robin?
I've got Rebecca and then Jim.
Thank you. I guess this would be for administration. I'm wondering, as we've been kind of forced to operate in a new way educationally, I'm certain that some things will go back to being the same, but we'll probably be looking at discovering some other ways of offering education in our district, probably all across the nation. Has the administration had any time to have conversations regarding different opportunities for offering an educational model that might somehow affect the decision to either change boundaries or build a new school?
Great question, Rebecca. I think just starting with this distance learning environment that we're in right now, we're going to continue to learn from this. And I think our vision as administration is to provide as many students as an opportunity as we can down the road. I even know of some staff members and some teachers that have talked to their building principals about, can we look at distance learning models down the road? What we don't know is the uncertainty, right? Even we can't sit here today and say, well, distance learning is an option, so we might not need as many students physically into a building, because the environment that we're in currently required a governor's executive order to suspend Century Code requirements, so there would be legislative actions for allow us to do distance learning down the road. But then secondly, we are also currently providing education in an environment where the majority of parents are also at home. If that is not a requirement and there aren't, with the threat of COVID-19, are we going to have as many students and parents and families choosing to take advantage of a distance learning opportunity, even if it were offered in our district, and versus physically being there? And then also, would we offer a distance learning only environment, or would we still expect those students to come into our buildings at some point? Because like I said before, this learning environment is very different than what we traditionally offer. Just the biggest advantage that we have right now going into distance learning is that our teaching staff at least had the opportunity until the start of the school year, until March, to build relationships with kids and families. What does that look like if there was a distance learning only school? The closest comparison currently we have is Woodrow Wilson, which has an online component mixed with face-to-face component. So at that point, it's hard to generalize, well, if distance learning is a thing of the future, we're not going to have a need for buildings. I can't make that statement. The same thing goes with looking at specialized programs like Dr. Gross talked about, whether it's, do we want to try to get more students to go to North or Ben Franklin or South by offering some specialized program opportunities, I fundamentally believe that we should work towards providing as many different opportunities as we can for our students, but we should provide those because we believe in those programs. And that's the investment that we want to make, not because we're trying to get X amount of students to go somewhere, because we have no guarantee that students from the south side of town are going to go to South or go to North because there's a specialized program there. We just don't have that data. And even if we were to survey our parents, we kind of did that last year with the state of the schools. We even talked about language immersion, and that was something that was brought to the board as well. And the response at that work session from the board was, we don't want to use that as an opportunity to try to backfill or try to guarantee kids, because we can't make that guarantee.
Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. First of all, I want to share a couple thoughts, and then I have a motion I'd like to make. Obviously, if we were down at the DO today having this meeting, I have a feeling it would be a packed room. I'm pretty sure all of you were looking at your email today. And I would dare say there is a large number in our community that hasn't been tracking our activity for the last 2.5 years on this, because quite frankly, it wasn't front and center and affecting them. So part of me thinks this is not the best environment to make this decision in. It may be the only environment we get to use going forward, so I'm not going to say we should never make a decision like this in a virtual meeting, because I don't know what the future is going to bring. Part of the future I do know, though, is that I think our revenue is going to be taxed. I suspect the shutdown on the economic activities in the state, and certainly the price of a barrel of oil, are going to impact the state revenues dramatically. And I don't know when that's going to turn around. So I have no illusion that we're going to have one incredible increase in foundation aid when the legislative session gets done next time around. I also kind of think we're going to see delinquency rates on local property taxes go up, just based upon the disruption economically to so many households, perhaps some of you, but certainly our friends and neighbors as well. So I think we have an unknown revenue future in terms of what is our forecast for growth. I think Jackie has done an outstanding job keeping track of what's going on in the past and projecting that forward. But I think she'd be the first to admit there could be some game changers going on with all of this that are going to slow down the rate of growth, potentially maybe even have a negative year on our projected revenue. It's for those two reasons and the fact that I think there is more that we still need to look at, that I'm going to move to table this item until a future date, and I'm not going to make that a date certain at this point in time.
I would second.
Second.
Okay, I heard Jim make a motion, and I think I heard Brian, or was it David that seconded it?
I do.
Okay, Brian. So if you are, let's see here, parliamentary procedures, if you are tabling an item without a certain definite time, you need to second. There is no debate, and you cannot amend it. So at this point, we need to take a vote on the floor.
But Robin,
go ahead.
Which motion are you saying it is? Are you trying to say it's tabled, like laying it temporarily aside? That's usually just laying it aside for a portion of the meeting. The other option is to postpone to a certain time. Those are your two motions to what is commonly referred to as tabling it.
And technically,
Robin?
we don't have a motion on the floor. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, there is no motion on the floor
I'll
to
change.
postpone.
Yeah, I'll change my motion to table it until the next meeting that we can hold live at the district office.
Second.
Okay, we've got Brian seconded that, amended that. don't believe there's any debate on this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anne Marie.
If you are postponing it to a certain amount of time, postponed to a certain time, yes, there is debate.
Okay, then we have a motion on the floor to move this agenda item to the next in-person meeting. I would entertain some discussion on that.
Robin,
Go ahead.
I'm supporting this. My comments were going to be that had the motion that was on our memo for today been made, I was planning to vote no on that motion, basically for conversation, Jim, that you brought up today. Not that I am against the proposal or against another solution such as boundary changes. But I think that the timing of this is quite challenging for us. I do appreciate the motion of, trying for us to be able to do this, have this discussion in person. I also believe that, as we all know, we have so much uncertainty going on, not only in the school district, but the nation and the world. And I'm pretty certain we all wish that we weren't facing this uncertainty, but I am not comfortable supporting what might have been the motion. Back in February, on February 21st, when we had our work session, I was very supportive of us moving forward with looking at another middle school, as is being presented to us today. But that was such a different time. We didn't have the uncertainty in front of us at that time. So I just want to let you know that I support, Jim, what you have put forward and what has been seconded, and explain to you my reason why. Thank you.
Can I go?
Other comments? Go ahead.
Same thing, Jim. I was about to do the exact same thing, that I don't feel in the situation that the whole world is in to do this without being able to let people speak. It is the right to everybody to be able to stand in front of the board and be able to voice their opinion on what they feel. And in a setting like this, it's something that we are taking away from them. So I would have to agree 100% on that as well, because people need to be able to bring forth. I mean, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. Other
Rob,
comments?
I'd like to just to make
Christy?
a comment. I don't disagree with Jim's comments. My concern is we have been dealing with this for 3 years, and there's never a good time to make a major decision like this. We have studied it. I thank both Bob and Rupak for your presentation tonight. I feel that it thoroughly explains why we're even considering this opportunity for new schools. So I think it's really hard and tough to table this until we are in person, because we don't know when that's going to be. And I think that we just need to, as a board, take a look at it and say, for 3 years, we've been dealing with this. When will we make that decision? And those decisions are hard. And no matter what we choose, we're never going to make all of the community happy, because when we were with the task force, there were unhappy people at that point. When we talked about boundary changes, when we talk about a new school, there's another group of people unhappy. So regardless of what we do, we're never going to make everyone happy. And it's not our obligation as a board to make those tough decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin?
Other comments? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Robin. So I actually would agree with Christy, and I would say this conversation started way back at the Long Range Facility Task Force in 2013. And so in terms of opportunities and that we have offered for community input and a back and forth, I do think there has been many opportunities for that. And I also think that there was a ton of time spent analyzing by using the guiding principles, by using research, by using So regardless of the answers of the additional information that was asked about tonight, we still face the same challenge. So if whatever those answers are become a reason to change or to fill an additional 300 students at North, we're still, now you're going against your own guiding principles. In terms of, you know, one or a group of students is going to have to pass one school to get to another. I think that back in even 2013, that was recognized, and folks said as part of that recommendation, a solution for declining enrollment could possibly be other educational programs. And I think that's what we should have been studying to help the problem of declining enrollment. I don't think you fix it by just continually, you know, busing children from way south to north. I think that you need an approach that's sustainable there. And I feel like that has been, you know, debated and talked about, and we've played out all of those scenarios and what that would mean for students and families and opportunities and equity. I don't know what those answers that you asked for tonight, how they would provide a different sort of direction for administration. It took them a lot of work to get here. It wasn't easy decision. It wasn't easy conversation. And what are they going to do if we wait another year? I mean, how long are we going to be on Zoom? We don't know that. I feel like we came here well prepared with a lot of information. And so to delay it has me concerned. I just, you know, patrons clearly communicate. They know how to communicate with us. They've reached out to us today, you know, emails, phones, texts. I think there has been many opportunities. They've participated in group sessions, and there isn't going to be, Christy's right, there isn't going to be one that makes everybody happy. I think what's the most important is what is best for all students, and that's what we apply to each one of these scenarios that were put in front of us.
Other comments?
Robin?
Go ahead, Brian.
Two things concern me, or actually just the one, but it's the operational cost of 1.6 million. Plus, there isn't really a cost yet how much teaching for this new middle school, how much that's going to cost us. And so if I was to have to vote on that today, I couldn't support that because we don't have the money for it. And I think Jim's right. We've got to examine what's going to happen here in the future. We have to pause here and come together and see what's going to happen.
Okay. Rupak, if you were to reverse engineer the timeline that you need to build by a target date, when do you need to know? And then I would also comment on a couple of other comments that are being made. What else would we hear from the public that we haven't heard already? And I'm not putting down anybody's motions here or ideas or hearing from the public by any means, but what we've learned is anytime there is an item on the agenda, the people that show up are the ones that oppose the item on the agenda. So I don't know if we're ever going to have equal feedback from both supporting and opposing until we have two solid motions or agenda items, build or boundaries. Right now, the only thing on the agenda is build. And so that skews the context that we received today. So that's, I tend to agree. I don't know what more information we're going to have other than providing people the opportunity to speak in front of us. I don't know if they're going to say anything different than what we've already heard, but I'm not quite sure how I'll vote on this motion. But part of it would be based on the timeline that you need for approval, Rupak, to make this happen at the right time.
What I'll say, and I know a couple other board members have their hands up as well, is I'll only speak to what I can speak to. I think the biggest uncertainty here is all the uncertain factors of what's going to happen next, right? Currently, what's proposed in the recommendation in front of you today would allow for a fall 23 build or opening. Now, construction timelines, securing bids, could that change because of COVID-19? And when we get back to normal, what does that look like? I can't necessarily tell you that, but obviously we know that if a build is the project that we're moving forward, it doesn't happen overnight. So you also have that. If you have increasing enrollment, which could or could not change, but right, that's what we're projecting right now. The impact of the delay of this decision, I think it's just important to know for administration, there isn't an endorsement here. And this is not to push it on a board decision or not. I think the most important conversation here is what are the factors that the board wants, or what are the data that we can provide to make a decision? Because administration did bring forward boundary change recommendations that came from a task force. But then what happened is that the boundaries had so many other side effects or impacts that led us to change the guiding principles, which are the factors on how we make a decision. So we changed the guiding principles, and off the new guiding principles, we brought forward this recommendation. If this gets delayed, I think that we have to continue our work. We're going to continue to see enrollment increases at Davies and Discovery. And if we can't do boundary changes and we can't build a new building, our options are going to be limited. And I think those are going to compromise some of your guiding principles, because what administration will probably have to bring to the board or the planning committee would be, at those two buildings, we might have to increase class sizes and go above some of the numbers, because where else do we put some of the students that are coming in? I will tell you right now that going into this next school year, just for student staff ratios at Davies, we are already looking at hiring 2 personnel, a counselor and a registrar, because those are individuals that meet with all the students, and we need to hire additional staff to accommodate the growth in the students. And we're getting requests from the building to make projects or renovations to create spaces for those additional staff members. And it's hard for us as an administration to say, no, find a place for these 2 new staff members that you need somewhere in your building, because we're waiting on the board to make a decision on why should we make a small term investment or an investment if there's going to be a new middle school down the road. So those are just some of the conversations that we'll continue to bring to planning and continue to bring to the board. But we're going to keep chipping at different solutions that will also cost money until we have a long-term vision. Administration would be happy with boundaries, would be happy with the new building. For us, we know that we have the ability to serve kids. We need to know what are those factors that the board members want to make their decisions based off of, and we will bring you a recommendation accordingly. And we feel like this is the second time we've done that. So we're happy. We appreciate the transparency and including the public comment, but those are just some of the impacts of the delay.
Robin?
Go ahead, Jim.
First of all, I want to thank the administration for all the work they've done and all the work you're still going to get to do on this, because we're a long way from probably the end result. I really don't know how any of us could make a good decision tonight if we don't know what the future population projection is, much like we now know for Davies and Discovery at South and Carl Bend and at Ben Franklin and North. Because I'm just as concerned about underpopulated schools as I am overpopulated schools. I need to see that data, because let's just say we decided to go build the new middle school, which someday will be built. Let's just put that out there. We know if we grow as a community, we'll eventually have a 4th comprehensive high school, a 4th comprehensive middle school. But if we build this thing and 4 years from now, South High is at 700 students, then we're going to have to do boundary changes to get enough students to South High. And we're going to be emptying out this building we just built. So I think we first have to really look at what does the pattern look like for the whole district, so we can determine, do we have to do boundary changes to have viable high schools at North and South? Or do the current boundaries keep them viable going forward? I believe that was my question to Bob several meetings ago about North High. I'm more than happy to worry about backfilling if we can't produce the curriculum because we don't have the number of students. So I couldn't support this motion tonight because I don't know the future of all of our secondary buildings. I get the fact that every week, every day of delay is a delay, but the data we just looked at projecting out, we don't really actually hit a threshold at Discovery until I think it was 2025, where we go over that building's capacity. Davies is a different matter. From my perspective, it's the middle school that's our biggest challenge. We could find short-term solutions at the high school level because we have tons of space at South High. Not ideal to have some of the Discovery students going to Davies, others maybe being assigned over to South. Not even suggesting that's what I want to support. I just want to make sure if we don't change boundaries, our other secondary buildings are just as viable as what we're trying to make sure we have in far South Fargo. And if that takes 3 months delay to do it, well, I suspect we're not going to really change the outcomes for a whole lot of students by that 3-month delay. So again, I think my motion is appropriate because I don't have the right data to make a good decision today. And that's my fault. I should have asked for this long ago, Bob. Certainly not the administration's fault.
Robin?
Go ahead, David.
One of the questions I have is, you know, we seem to be given this option that if we build a new high school, we can begin infilling Fargo North, for example, by making it a magnet school, by introducing all these new programs. Why aren't we doing that now? If we found that 200 more kids would be interested in going to Fargo North because of offerings that they couldn't get at Davies, for instance, we may find that we've just pushed our timeline even farther into the future. If this is one of the ideas that we have, and it's a tremendous idea, why aren't we acting on it now? Why are we waiting to see, well, you know, as the numbers continue to decline, then we'll start doing things at North to get more kids up there? I don't know why the administration isn't showing us what could be done for that curriculum now rather than the problem is now. We have a discrepancy in the numbers of students.
David, I'll just respond to that real quick and say administration did present some of those ideas. So at the February, I think 2018 work session, we had talked about looking at specialized programming. And I don't know if you remember, David, but at that work session, the board members gave us 5 different options on how to explore. This was when we were planning for the task force. And we said, what do you want the parameters to be for this task force? And we had included the option of the Career Workforce Academy at South. We'd included the option of a language immersion or even anything else. And that was not prioritized by the board members. So that was presented by administration. And I think the other conversation right now is currently at this moment in time, South and North are not at a point where we're worried about their viability or offering to our students. I think what Jim is asking is let's look at it long term. And if we're going to get to that point, then we need to address both issues at the same time. But right now, we're not at a point where we're worried about the viability at Fargo North or Fargo South.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Robin, is that okay?
Sure.
On that note, Rupak, didn't RSP provide projections on those buildings as well at the last task force?
Yep, so we have the RSP projections for 5 years out for all of our buildings. I think what Bob presented today for Davies and Discovery was pulling just from those cohort of kids. And I think that's what Jim is asking for all the way up to when we have the last kindergarten class.
Did you find those to be significantly different than the RSP projections that go out 5 years for Davies and Discovery, the ones that you did?
What I found is they were very much in line with what RSP had provided for us.
Mm-hmm.
What it does not factor in though is the mobility and or as more homes are built in that area and the impact that will have on the number of students on the south side of town. But the numbers were very much in line with the RSP report.
Robin?
And, oh, right.
Go
I have
ahead.
another, go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, okay. And also what we don't know is how COVID-19 is going to affect reports like RSP. You know, that's something that I'm sure all across the nation, demographers are going to be busy probably putting together newly requested information. I'm not necessarily needing more feedback from the public. Yes, I received all of these messages today, just like everyone else did. But when I saw the agenda, this was already on my mind in terms of my concern for us making the decision at this time. Again, based on the extreme uncertainty that we as a whole entire community and world are facing. So I'm hesitant to make a decision in this time of extreme uncertainty, knowing that we have the financial challenges already in front of us, as Jackie addressed, and the uncertainty in terms of additional financial challenges that we might be facing, such as what Jim referenced. I don't believe that I need additional information from administration other than what has been already discussed at this meeting. If it's determined by the board that we need to take a look at where we might be going as a result of COVID-19, I'd be supportive in us having a conversation about what kinds of additional information we might need surrounding that, and how what else we might need to make a decision. So I really appreciate administration walking us through the history of what I'll call this project. We've been involved in it as board members, but anyone that is joining us this evening, you know, some individuals have not been involved in this deep of a conversation. So it's been very helpful for you to walk through that timeline with us. So thank you.
Robin? Oh, Anne Marie can go first, and then I've got something.
Okay.
I think I just want to remind everyone that the motion on the floor is to postpone this agenda item until the next meeting that can be held live at the district office, and would just kindly remind people that discussion when there's a motion on the floor should be as much as possible germane to that motion. So that's your motion on the floor that that if depending on how that action would go once you vote, is that this agenda item would not come back before you until your meeting at the district office. So just wanted to remind you of where you guys are at in your conversation.
And
thank you for so politely doing that. And there might be some conversation as to, can we get more information prior to meeting in person if it's just purely information we are seeking. So I'll just throw that in there to convolute the discussion. Was it Christy? Did you have?
I did. I'd like to move to amend the motion to delay this agenda item to the May 12th meeting. That gives us approximately 30 more days to see what is happening. It would give Bob the opportunity to pull the information for north and south data. And I just want to reiterate, we need to make a decision on this, and waiting until we can see everyone face to face, I feel is too long. So I move to amend the motion to bring it back May 12th.
Robin, I would second that motion.
Okay. Okay, so now we have an amendment to the initial motion to move this agenda item to the May 12th meeting that will include a report on the request of impacts on the Midtown and North Side schools. So we have an amended motion. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Robin, if I can.
Sure.
I supported the plan brought tonight up until probably over this weekend, as I was really taking a hard look at the long-term consequences of this COVID crisis. Jim's revenue concerns are ones that I was going to bring up during this discussion as well. I think Rebecca brought up that there's probably going to be some lessons learned that might apply to a new building. But I also think, and so for that reason, I'm really hesitant to support building a building right now here tonight. That said, we need a solution. Davies is packed, and it's really a burden on planning for the operations of that building and delivering our students there an equitable solution. I don't know when we're going to be able to meet again. It's good seeing you all here tonight on the screen. I would really look forward to seeing you all again in person. But based on the latest guidance that I'm hearing, that could be a long ways out. I think giving us 30 days gives us a chance to get some more of that information, gives us a chance to learn more about what's happening from this rapidly shifting situation. And I think I would ask that on that next agenda, then we would have this construction motion, but also a boundaries motion, as Rob, I think you had maybe suggested. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment?
Can I ask something? So,
Sure.
So can I ask a question, like how by delaying it for, again, 30 days or more until the end of May, how will that change the fact that we still will need to find a space for these students? How will COVID change that we need to still educate the students that are coming into our district? Those are costs that are going to happen regardless. And I really think that this particular plan is also very efficient in that it is a campus that is shared. So I'm trying to keep my questions around how delaying it in any shape or form will lead us to a different answer. I think about those students and like John said, what's equitable for those students. And the longer we leave them there, the more likely it is we're going to have to increase class sizes. And some of these other modifications that you're talking about, passing one school to another, adjusting these values, is this the time to do that? I thought we'd already established which values we were willing to modify and not modify. So I think that that's also dangerous to talk about, or to use as a reason at this point. I feel like we've been down that road over and over. And again, I just feel like we can't keep kicking this can down the road. It has been since 2013. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, Anne Marie, you ready for a roll call on the amendment?
Raise his hand.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep.
My comment can wait till after the vote.
Okay.
Which, are we just voting on the amendment or are we voting on?
Yep.
The
So
amendment.
you are voting to amend the original motion to postpone this agenda item to the May 12th board meeting. Okay.
And then what will, okay, and then we'll vote actually on whether or not
Yep.
we're agreeing on postponing it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Anybody need any more clarifying on what we're voting on? Okay. Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
President Nelson.
Yes, motion is amended. So now we will be voting on the amended motion. Any further discussion on the amended motion?
So
Say,
do we discuss, Robin, though? Do we have opportunity for more discussion around the topic?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, Brian, were you gonna ask something?
no, go ahead.
Well, I guess, I did say, my comments in terms of delaying this decision. So at this point, Brian, you can go.
No, I'm just looking for clarification on the next vote.
Sorry, Brian, you cut off there. You're looking for clarification on what?
On the next vote.
Okay. So we will be voting on postponing this agenda item until the May 12th board meeting.
Robin,
Go ahead, Rupak.
first off, I do want to say I appreciate the board and I commend the board for doing their due diligence. I think it's the board's responsibility not to take decisions of this magnitude lightly. So I do appreciate that. My request, or on behalf of all of administration, is going to be between now and whenever the board vote is going to happen, please reach out to us and use us for any pieces of information that you want that we can provide. Sometimes we just don't know what it is that different board members seek. So we try to put together a memo, what we think is based on what's being communicated to us from a planning committee or something else. So we want to make sure that we're providing everyone the information they can do. The one thing I am going to implore all of board members to do is I appreciate Jim's notion of let's look at the same, compare apples to apples. Let's look at the north side and enrollment impacts like we did on the south side. I think I've heard the term revenue for a new building go around several times. I think that needs to be compared equally as well. There shouldn't be an assumption that there's going to be no revenue impacts on boundary changes or if we were to employ other solutions as well. So I ask board members, use us. We can't project all of the future revenue, but a new building has costs, obviously, but boundary changes also have costs. All of the solutions have costs. So we can't just say, oh, this is so expensive and we're going into a deficit, we can't afford it, because that doesn't mean option B also is not going to cost us a significant amount of dollars. So I'm just going to ask board members to please compare apples for apples.
Actually, I have a follow-up to that, if I may, Robin.
Sure, go ahead.
So when part of those analysis that were looked at in terms of what would it take to give enough of a boundary change and relief to accommodate for future growth, and looking at 500 students, moving 500 students, it has been said before, it's not that simple in terms of black and white. You can't just draw a line, right? You can to find 500 students. However, then you dramatically increase the inequity in terms of the socioeconomics, and those were all shared during that task force time. So then that again leads you back to all the other scenarios, which never could accomplish moving more than 200 or so students. So if we do that, we're back to needing another school, and this time is going to be a high school, and that's more expensive than even a middle school. This potential, or this solution, because something needs to be done, this solution was in fact also the most fiscally responsible in the long term, because like Rupak said, just moving boundaries has also cost implications. So consider that too in delaying our decision.
Robin?
Go ahead, Rebecca.
So this is more a question for John, and I don't know if I should be asking this now before we vote or not, but I think you had requested that information be brought to our next board meeting that involved boundary changes. So I'm wondering how it's decided, what that information is, who's involved in that process, because we've had so many conversations regarding so many different options. Thank you.
So to clarify, my ask was not for more information. It was to put a boundary decision on the agenda.
We do have a governance meeting on Thursday morning. So we could assemble, working on the May meeting. So that's certainly something we can discuss at governance.
Next week, April 23rd, not this week.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay.
Robin, I've got something too. I just think that it's really important. We talk about our biggest priorities, and that's to educate the kids and adjusting or adapting to growth. And we really need to look at our board and our entire district and prepare for the future. And we need to prepare for the future rather than always being reactionary. And I think there are times when we are behind the 8 ball and we're always trying to catch up. And I think it's time for us to be make those bold decisions and really prepare for the future of all children for Fargo Public Schools.
Thank you. I would say, I don't know if we're going to have any more financial information on May 12th. I don't think we're going to have any really solid financial information until the next legislature is in session, which is in January. So I'm troubled with that. I don't know if we'll be any more enlightened financially in the next year, quite frankly. Other comments before we call a roll? I hear no one, and everybody's frozen. So I assume we're ready to vote. Okay, Anne Marie?
Okay, you are voting on postponing this agenda item until the May 12th board meeting. Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
No.
Ulrich,
No.
Ani,
No.
Benson,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
President Nelson.
No. Motion fails. So we're back to the agenda items. We don't have a motion on the floor right now.
President Nelson?
I would need, go ahead.
I would move that we authorize administration to proceed with securing bids to construct a new school which will initially serve students in grades 8 and 9 in South Fargo on currently owned district land not to exceed $60 million.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay,
Second.
Jennifer Benson, second. Okay,
Mhm.
discussion.
Again, I would say, let's do this for the students and the families. They need a decision. We have spent a lot of time gathering research, and I really, really think that we have many, many examples to be able to point to. And I think the only way this decision, I've gone through every single one of these scenarios, hours and hours and hours. The only way that we can make it work and still provide long-term sustainability for not only our students and our families, but our taxpayers is to be proactive in this situation. And we've already delayed this decision long enough. And I just lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Brandy. I'll come back to it.
Yeah, just sitting here and doing the whole group discussion, I mean, I don't think that it is clearly a need that we need to have another school. We are clearly overcrowded. We've known this for a long time. And listening to all of our group discussion, which I think was a very good one, the amount of time that staff has put into this and trying to figure it out, and again, and kicking it down, it's not gonna, what happens if we don't get back to normal in a year? I mean, we can't just keep kicking it. So I do agree. We just gotta make the decision. I know that this Zoom probably is not ideal, but you know what? It's not ideal to have a COVID-19 crisis either. So I really just think that we just need to just figure out what we're gonna do. That's all I have to say.
I know what I was going to say. Really,
Go ahead.
Thank you. It comes back to the big question would be, are we willing to change our values and our guiding principles? Because the only reason each one of these that were vetted didn't make it to the final recommendation is because of our values. It is because of the community values, which we have reached out to time and time again to find out exactly what those are or if those have changed. And I mean in an organized fashion, done that through task forces and long range facility planning and strategic updating and all of that. And time again, it goes back to neighborhood schools. We don't want to drive by one to get to another. You know, unless that's going to change, and unless we, when you look at these scenarios, if we want to remove the trying to balance our schools in terms of socioeconomic, that is the only way you will be able to move enough kids farther north than to make enough room for future enrollment. That's the only way. And from what I've heard, that's not an option.
Okay, other comments?
Robin,
David?
I just don't, you know, I hear Brandy and others saying we're overcrowded. If you look at the numbers of kids that we have in our high schools, we're not overcrowded. We're out of balance. And I don't know why we are so terribly concerned about making this decision right now and not looking at significant boundary changes. If our guiding principles have to be changed, we're not doing anything that's going to harm neighborhood elementary schools. We've tried very hard to have all kids within walking distance. We're doing very well at that. Middle schools, maybe that's simply not possible. When we've got the capacity in schools and it's not being utilized, and we don't have a clue right at the moment what is going to happen to the attendance at Fargo North and Fargo South as far out as we have projected Davies. I want to make sure that we have an active curriculum in those schools so that we haven't built a monumentally wonderful educational system on the south end at the cost to the rest of the district.
Robin?
Thank you. Yes, Rebecca.
For the same reasons that I started my earlier comments, I'll still be voting no on this tonight. Mainly, again, that has to do with the fact that we are dealing with very, very uncertain times. And I am just not comfortable in making the decision when we have this uncertainty. COVID-19 has created all kinds of problems and challenges. Some of us might think of, you know, opportunities that it's created as well for, you know, how we might be looking at doing things down the road. I feel like it's okay for us to hold off a bit on making a decision. My feelings have changed dramatically since we had that February 21st work session. And I'm just not comfortable with it right now. Whatever we decide is fine. You know, we'll all go forward and we'll be working to, you know, help ensure that our kids get the best education possible, of course, under all these circumstances. But everyone across the globe is being asked to, you know, work in completely different situations than they had, than what we want to, really. So we're being pushed and we're being challenged, and I just want you to know that I'll support whatever we decide tonight, but I won't be voting yes.
Thank you.
Robin?
Go ahead.
I just want to David's point, when he doesn't want us to sacrifice education on the north side and the south side, I don't know why, with the teachers and the staff that we have, I don't know why we would feel that the educational experience at those locations would suffer because of a new school. I think that our teachers right now do a phenomenal job at those schools. And just because we have a new building doesn't mean that the decline of education would happen.
Robin, can I
Thank you.
respond to that?
Of course.
I'm not talking about the quality of the teachers. Our teachers are phenomenal. I'm talking about the fact that there may not be enough students that we can have a certain AP class or a foreign language or something. I'm not talking about the quality of the teachers. I'm talking about not enough seats in the chairs to be able to provide a class that may be wanted and may be very necessary.
David, I think it's a fair question. And I do think, well, I know that was one that was asked even last time when there was an elementary change. And I believe Rupak may have touched on it a little bit earlier, but it was definitely part of the conversation all along the way with every scenario. How do we make sure that we're providing stability in programming for the buildings that aren't at capacity? And every time we were told that that was one of the motivators for the last change, and that they felt that was not at risk at this moment or even in the future, to what was part of that conversation in terms of what the projected numbers look like.
I would say, I'll make a comment here. If we vote yes, administration will have clear direction. If we vote no, administration will have no direction tonight. So not trying to convince you one way or the other, but we're going to need to come out of this. We need to move forward somehow. So that would be a side effect of your vote tonight.
Robin, that assumes if we vote no on this, there wouldn't be a second motion that comes forward. That might give direction.
I think that that's a fair statement. Thank you, Jim.
Can I ask a question? Yes.
Sure.
So I'm curious because I've heard a lot about the hesitation really mostly being around COVID-19. How would that change the fact that we still have overcrowding in our schools that needs to be addressed?
Which school is overcrowded currently?
Days?
Oh, I think it's actually under capacity currently, isn't it?
Didn't they have to build like 40 lockers to accommodate additional students? And with
Well, that may
progression,
be, but I think the capacity is listed at 1,350 students, and I don't think we're at 1,350 quite yet.
and what's next year? Higher
Maybe
than that?
administration.
Bob, go ahead.
As of now, again, if we just move forward, the students who are one grade level previous, moving forward, we would be at about 1,305 students under the 1,350, which is the capacity. Yes, we did add lockers, but that was just to get to the capacity that the building was designed for.
Bob, what did your slide show?
The slide showed 1,302, about if again, that's the current 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students moved forward 1 year.
Okay.
Per the RSP projections,
Yeah.
for next year, Davies would be at 1,315. The following year, 1,365. I could keep going if you want me to, but
Well, 1,365, I mean, that's not long. And Jim, I'm just curious, you know, have you had a chance to reach out to administration at that building to gather their feedback on what it's like a day to day and how they would see, the best option moving forward would be for the students?
Are you asking me if I called Troy Cody up and quizzed him?
Yes.
No, my communication usually goes through RUPOC rather than directly to the staff.
Okay, and how long, well, I believe we've also heard from staff, but how long also we would need to consider how long it also takes to build a building, right? So if we're over capacity and not this fall, but next, what are we gonna do?
Well, one solution would be boundary changes, another would be increased class sizes. I can assure you building a new building isn't going to address capacity issues till 2023 or 2024. We may have to address them in the short term a different way anyway.
Well,
my big concern isn't COVID, Jennifer. It's whether or not we're going to have enough students if we freeze today's boundaries, in particular at South High.
Well, I can assure you that I have had conversations with administration that's involved because to me, it is important to know what they think because they are the ones in the buildings every single day with these students. And I can tell you, there are concerns that we keep kicking this can down the road. And I can also say the best solution they have supported is this one in front of us.
I'm just going to chime in here. I appreciate the discourse around this conversation, and I appreciate board members taking this decision and doing their diligence, what they should. I am going to ask that board members not make assumptions about administrators in this district. This is a decision that has a lot of different factors at play. We had administrators that recommended the boundary changes when they were made. We have administrators that recommend the proposal that's being brought today to the board members. It is our job to administer the board's vision in the school district based on what you decide as a collective group of 9 that you want to invest in. And where are your values? And those values are identified in your guiding principles, and those have been changed. We brought boundary recommendations. So I would just ask that you don't try to pin administrators against one another or the structure that we have for governance, because that's not going to be productive to this conversation. I think we need to realize that this is a difficult decision, and board members need to get in a collective group and decide our vision for the districts is this, and based on those values, we will bring forward the best recommendation.
Can I follow up to that?
Sure.
That was certainly not my intention. My intention was to say that there are experts also that we should be tapping into and using that information to make an educated decision. And they do. Those are they do have the best interest of those students at heart. So all I was saying is, have we considered that? We're sitting here trying to make a decision that's best for all students. That, to me, it's like asking to hear feedback from teachers and what's happening in their classrooms. Haven't we been down this road before where it's been a mistake not to ask those that are actually involved? That's all I was saying. I think that it's an important consideration to understand and to use in our decision.
And Jennifer, I completely respect that. I think my only point is that you will have different staff members have different views. I think
yes,
this is a decision that impacts different people differently. And I can guarantee you that today you received board emails telling you to vote down this decision from staff members, and you received emails that were advocating for this decision from staff members as well. Everyone brings their own personal judgments, and we're all a product of our own experiences. This is a decision for the board based on their vision. So that's why I say just be careful, because we can pick and choose which staff members we want to listen to. We have the entire staff at Davies and Discoveries that probably have opinion on this, and you'll probably get a wide range of opinions.
Robin.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, I think it was Anne Marie that I had my hand up earlier, but I'm going to wait a little bit. I think Anne Marie had a comment, and maybe Jim.
I just wanted to share with you, I have RSP's projections up, and it doesn't go through as much of the years as Bob had as far as projecting out, obviously our current enrollment. I know he'd work on that for you, but what RSP has projected for at least South High, I know that was a concern about, you know, boundaries and the schools we have. But right now, South is projecting at 933, followed by 961, followed by 1,004, 994, 1,005. So just for, you know, those next few years, little up and down, but pretty consistent there. And North High is not too much different from those numbers as well. They get a little bit more increased. So just wanted to share with you that reminder of where RSP at least has for those next few years.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, Robin, I've got one last thing to share, and then I'd be perfectly fine if somebody wanted to move previous question to get on to the next agenda item.
Okay.
You know, many of you were not on the board when we built Davies, which probably came in at a price tag a little less than what we're talking about spending here tonight. We took an incredible amount of heat from our community because they weren't allowed to vote on it. They didn't quite understand that we weren't asking for increased taxing authority, which is typically why you go to the public to vote for a building. I'm not suggesting, although maybe others believe we should, that we need to have a public vote. I think we have the taxing ability with our current authority to build this building, whether we do it tonight, whether we do it 6 months from now, whether we do it 3 years from now. But I do believe, even though we've talked about this concept of a building for a couple of months now, primarily, quite frankly, more so in committee than at public board meetings, there is a whole lot of people in our community that had no clue we were considering spending $60 million. And then if we're going to do it tonight, in our first virtual board meeting where people really can't come and scream at us, I think we're just inviting some huge negative public energy to come at the district. You know, and I'll take you back to something that I think started our meeting. Jen, who is a staff member who spoke on behalf of the teachers, that suggested this might not be the right decision at the right time. And she did bring up the fact that we are going to have to go back to the public. I think you said 7 years, Jen. I think it's actually in about 5 years we have to go back. I think it's sooner than that because we have to have the vote before we actually get to the sunset date. But in any case, whatever time frame it is, I just think we are not being as transparent as we could be with this. And I get the fact that we might not be able to have a regular board meeting again, but whatever decision we make today, and if it had been to table it, would have been in the front page of the form, and it will be in the front page of the form, which is going to alert the entire community of what we're going to do. So at a minimum, what I'm going to do is offer an amendment that this motion is a first reading and would require a second reading at our next board meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
I'll second that, Jim.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment.
So Rebecca, or I mean, Robin, can you just clarify for everyone what exactly that means? That delays the recommendation and again, does something else or just that?
Well, Christy has the motion on the floor for to move forward with moving or building this new building. Mm-hmm. And Jim is amending the motion to change that to a first reading.
Change it to a first reading. So the Christie's motion would come back at the next meeting?
That is
correct, if it passes.
If what passes? Your tabling, your motion to table?
If we pass my amendment to our motion and then that motion passes, it will come back at the next meeting. if we pass my motion or defeat it, and the main motion of Christie's gets defeated, then it doesn't come back.
Got it. Thank you.
We're going to be voting twice here. Is everybody clear on what we're voting on, or have any comments or questions on the amendment on the floor?
All right, first is Jim's.
Robin, are
Okay,
you ready
I
for the
don't
roll?
hear anybody.
Is that correct?
I think we're ready.
Yes,
Brandy,
Brandy.
did
I
you have a
think it is.
question?
I think
Yeah,
it-
is what Jim just said, is that what we're voting on? I just need to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
You ready for the roll?
We're voting on Jim's motion.
Yep, on the amendment to make it a first reading and require a second reading at the next board meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
I think we're ready.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
President Nelson,
Did you get David Paulson?
yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Yes. Okay, we have an amended motion to vote upon now. Now that is the main motion we have a motion on the floor to approve the new building. And this will serve as the first reading, and the second reading will be at the next board meeting. Any questions or comments on that?
So you could vote yes tonight on this one. And that you have to vote it on again next week to actually make it an official vote, right? Right?
Essentially, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Which is kind of what the motion was on the floor before.
Yeah, I just wanted
Just
to make
the
sure that I
fine.
wanted to make sure I fully understood how it was applied. Mhm. Okay.
Any questions? Anne Marie, do you want to read the motion now for clarity? Because I'm sure we're all, just want to be sure what we're voting on.
The motion on the floor is to consider for a first reading and require at the next board meeting, a second reading, to authorize administration to proceed with securing bids to construct a new school, which will initially serve students in grades 8 and 9 in South Fargo on currently owned district land, not to exceed 60 million.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we're ready, Anne Marie.
Paulson,
No.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Knutson,
No.
Brian Nelson,
No.
President Nelson,
No, I think the motion fails. I lost count, Anne Marie.
it failed. Yes, 4 yeses, 5 nos.
Okay, now we're back to the original motion of moving forward with approving the building.
No, you have no motion on the floor now.
Oh,
No, we just defeated that motion.
Yep.
okay, got it.
So,
So we have an agenda item that we're looking at. I need direction from the board with how to proceed.
Yeah, well, I'm going to wait to see the data from Bob's projection because I actually do have a boundary change motion I'd like to make, but I will first want to make sure that there's validity for why I want to make it. So I'm prepared at the next board meeting, and please do put a placeholder for a motion regarding boundary changes.
Okay,
So at the next meeting, does that mean that this agenda item will automatically be forwarded, or do we have to make a motion for that as well? Or a request?
it would
I
typically.
I just made a
Go ahead.
request to the board president, which is, I think, the way we do it, and it'll probably go to governance and be plugged in somewhere.
Oh, so do we need a motion then for this? If that motion just failed to treat this as a first reading, can we make a motion to approve it or move it to the next meeting? So that we put a timeline again on it?
Yep, there is no motion on the floor right now, so anybody can make a motion.
I would make that motion.
Can you please
Will
specify
you
your motion?
state that?
Mhm.
Can we have the wording of what that motion is, please?
Oh. I guess that it would be, my motion would be that this come forward again at the next board meeting, so that we're talking about both of them. Sorry, you could probably leave off that last comment.
I second that.
Okay. Well, this is a roundabout way of getting there. So we are now have a motion on the floor to bring us back to the May 12th meeting. And that's all the motion includes at this point. Somebody can add the boundary discussion as well, or the motion stands as bringing this back as it was tonight.
Robin, this is Rupak. I'm going to ask that if there is any other agenda items that want to be added to, whether it's a boundary discussion or some other things at the next board meeting, the board members just communicate with you and then we bring that through governance. Just because we would have a lot of questions on to what does that memo look like? What is the proposal? I don't know if this would be the right forum to get some of those things hashed out. So I would just say they work with you and you bring that through governance.
Robin, I have a question on the motion. Are we saying the next board meeting being April 28th or May 12th? I may have misheard something there.
I said
The motion that was made.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, Robin.
That is the motion on the floor, the next meeting. So
The next meeting,
typically,
April.
typically that is when we have our regular board meeting. Based upon the outcome of this meeting, we would determine if we need that board meeting. We are required by statute to have at least one meeting monthly. So the board could choose to forego the second meeting in April or reconvene on May 12th. So the motion on the floor is to bring this agenda item to the next meeting at this point. I don't have the power to change the motion.
I'm not sure that, is that going to give Bob enough time to be able to gather the information? I guess I'm more worried about gathering the information and getting it to us before the 28th.
I think we already have the information because this has already been presented to us before. But I can't speak for Dr. Gross or Dr. Gandhi.
If I may, if I'm being asked to bring forward a similar data set for Ben Franklin and North Carl Ben and South High School by the next meeting, that is certainly something that is doable.
Thank you, Bob. That's what I was talking about.
And when we're talking about the next meeting, we're talking about our second meeting in April.
That is currently, go ahead, Jim.
I think the next meeting will be whatever the next meeting is. And as Robin pointed out, that may be in April, that may be our first meeting in May, but whatever the next meeting is would be when this topic would come up if Jennifer's motion passes.
Well, here's
my idea isn't going to see the light of day till I can get to governance and get it put on an agenda.
And I guess to clarify, maybe I was misunderstanding. I thought that that was a request that you were making of the board now, in terms of a motion. So it's a little bit unprecedented, I guess, because obviously I would prefer not to delay this decision. I, again, feel like we had an ample opportunity to talk about it, but if there's a scenario that you feel would be worthy of delaying this decision, I feel like I wish you would share it right now, so that.
Well, Jennifer, I'll share one thing. We just defeated the motion to build the building by a vote of 5-4. Yes, it was a first reading, but there will be no second reading absent the motion you're making. So we just defeated it, okay? So the next solution, because we're not going to leave our administration hanging, is, okay, let's get back and get serious and look at what we can do in boundary changes to buy additional time. But I didn't put forward a motion for an agenda item. The proper protocol is to let the president know and then have governance schedule it, which is what I'm doing.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. So if it's completely defeated, then I would like my motion to stand that it come back again. Because again, we just keep delaying this. And any boundary change, we've been over this, is going to only provide temporary relief, not enough. We're going to be right back here building schools. Jim said it himself earlier, building a school is inevitable. So why do we keep kicking this can down the road? That's only negatively affecting our students.
So we have a motion on the floor to bring this back to the next meeting. That does not prohibit somebody else from bringing the additional boundary discussion back to the next meeting through the governance agenda committee channels. That's the motion on the floor. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor? I don't hear anybody or see anybody. So I think we're ready for a roll call on the motion. Anne Marie.
Motion on the floor is to forward the agenda item to the next board meeting. Rodenbiker.
No.
Ulrich.
Yes.
Ani.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Knutson.
No.
Brian Nelson.
No.
Paulson.
No.
President Nelson.
No, motion fails. So now we are not discussing, we don't have a motion on the floor, and we do not have anything to move the motion of building the building to the next meeting. Board members, how would you like me to proceed? Yes.
The way I'd like you to proceed is to give me at least 4, maybe 5 minutes, since we normally would have a break and I could go to the boys' room. I still kind of need that break before we go on to the next item, if that's okay.
I think that is appropriate. It's 7:43. We will reconvene in 5 minutes at 7:48.
Thank you.
Make sure you mute your microphones, please. Okay, if we can all settle into our seats, please, we'll get started. As soon as I see your shining faces on my computer screen.
Robin, looks like you have everybody back.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, we are back to item 5A, the business section of our agenda, long-range facility planning, new schools in South Fargo. How would the board like to proceed?
Robin,
What?
Yes,
do we need to take any action on this? Following the conversations we've already had?
well, there was an original motion to move this agenda item. We can take no action on it, which delays this without a discussion date indefinitely.
Robin, could we bring it, through governance to bring it back on the agenda next meeting?
Certainly could.
There is no motion on the floor right now, just to clarify. And as far as Christy, your suggestion, that motion to forward it to the next board meeting was voted down. So I just want to, as we come back together here, just remind you, you have no motions on the floor. And your exact thought there, Christy, was just voted down.
So Robin,
Yes,
so if we could decide to move on to item B, probably. And also if a board member wants to contact, this is my thought, is if a board member wants to contact you and request that, even though, as Christy discussed that, and Anne Marie reminded us that item failed this evening, I would imagine that if a board member wants to contact you and ask for that item to be put on the next governance committee agenda for discussion, that you would grant that.
of course. And so I would just ask if there are anybody else wants to make a motion on this item before we move on to item 5B.
So where does that leave administration? Just waiting?
Yes,
But we'll have a governance committee meeting quite soon, Robin. When is that?
a week from Thursday.
So can we make sure that it's at least on there? I mean, especially if we're talking about an alternative here.
Certainly can. I've already received the verbal request, so that will be on that agenda,
Okay,
on the governance agenda.
yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss on item 5A?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I assume everybody can hear what I'm saying. I don't see a lot of people
Yeah.
on the
We're
on the
good.
screen. Okay. Item 5B is the superintendent contract, memo number 100.
Okay, so that's me.
Yes.
Okay, so you all have the summary of the recommendations in front of you. And as the chair, I just want to take a minute to highlight some of the discussion that happened during that meeting. And really, we talked about, Rupak's time here, some of the goals that he had set for the district, some of those that he's accomplished, some of the challenges, and then as well. And then the committee asked him to share his ideas around the current contract terms. And so he did share 4 items that basically rise to the top for him. And so I'm just going to highlight those as things that we discussed. And that was first, long-term security and predictability, expressing his desire for a longer contract. 3 years, even 4, he had suggested. Number 2 was to really request that the board identify what the values would be from year to year on the, or within this evaluation process to bring or to really bring some to eliminate as much subjectivity as possible. And 3, we talked about, or he suggested ways, exploring ways in which we could structure this in a way that doesn't contribute to widening the gap in salary disparities between CEOs, administrators, and their employees. And so you can see the term in front of you that the committee did think that it would be a good idea to recommend a 3-year. The rest of the content was not unanimous, although consensus was reached. So it's here, and we don't take obviously a formal vote in committee. So so just know that. But you see the 1, 2, and 3 within this proposal that is included in terms of his what that would look like over a 3-year term. And you know, really that doesn't address the compounding factor that was highlighted as a concern by both RUPAC and board members in, and so that really doesn't, this offer does not change that. Let's see, what other I wanted to make, let's see, one more point here. Oh, the defined values. We were unable to agree to what those might look like. And so for that reason, again, it wasn't a unanimous decision. So at this point, I would move that we do not accept the recommendation in front of you and that we send this back either to the ad hoc or for purposes of a deeper discussion with more board members, send it to negotiations committee to be further discussed, because I really do believe, and you can take this off the motion, but I'm trying to explain that I think that when we're discussing that topic in particular, it really needs to involve more of the board. So anyways, my motion again would be that we not approve the recommendation in front of you.
So Jennifer, can you expand a little bit upon, okay, so there wasn't a consensus. Obviously, you were not part of that consensus. So were you disagreeing with the percentages of increase, or what RUPAC's salary increase might be tied to?
So both, really. I don't feel like we at all, we didn't come to an agreement around what those identified values would be or could be. We had some discussion around that, but we never came to an agreement on that. And then, so in other words, it would just be right now, you know, a recommended increase year to year, right? And without sort of a defined value that we're measuring or that we're looking at within that band of criteria. Secondly, I don't agree with the increases defined here year to year, not only because of the percent, but because we won't maybe know, right, where we're going to be at in 3 years. Although the one thing we did come to a unanimous consensus on is I would be okay with offering a 3-year contract my comments really aren't reflective of RUPAC's work or what I think of RUPAC's work. It's just, I think that this recommendation needs more work.
Robin? Rupak,
Go ahead, Chris.
Rupak can go
And-
first, and then I will say something.
We have a motion on the floor right now.
There's no motion on the floor. I would ask for clarification on what that motion is, and there has not been a second to any motion.
Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry. I
not on
kind
the
of read on, but my intent was to make a motion that we do not accept this recommendation as presented.
Okay.
I don't understand a motion to not accept something. I don't think that that would be an appropriate motion because there isn't, I don't know how you would not accept a recommendation if the recommendation is not on the floor.
But isn't the
Agreed.
recommendation on the floor because it's in front of us at a board memo?
No.
No,
Jim has his
a
hand.
board member needs to bring a motion to the floor. For
Jim,
us
you're
to
on mute.
proceed
Okay.
Jim, you're still on mute. I'm unmuting.
Ah,
Here, I unmuted
Oh.
you.
can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Is it okay if I make a motion?
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to move that we enter into a contract for calendar year 2020 through 2022 for Dr. Rupak Gandhi, as per the percentage increases that were noted in Memo 100. But it's a 2-year contract that I'm suggesting, not a 3, with a 1.6% increase for next year's contract and 2% for the following year.
This is Rebecca. I'll second that.
Okay, now the motion's on the floor. To give a little bit of history on this, an ad hoc committee is assigned annually to renew the superintendent's contract. In the past, the ad hoc committee, well, it's always consisted of 3 people. This year's committee was chaired by Jennifer Benson, and the 2 other board members were John Rodenbiker and Christy Ulrich. Typically, we've only done 2 years in the past. That doesn't mean the board cannot change what we've done in the past. This is a renewable every year, so the contract renews every year for 2 years, essentially. I will also, I think it's very important to say that our job as board members is to evaluate the superintendent in his annual review that is required by North Dakota Century Code. And all board members rated RUPAC's performance satisfactory. I wish we could say super satisfactory, but our options on our form is satisfactory. There is also, going back 5 years, we formally would base the superintendent's increase on his or her performance on achieving operational duties that are in the operational plan, basically completing their operational plan. That concept was removed when I was not on the board for 2 years. And that was really the only measurable piece that we had in there at that time. I know that conversations at the committee level, because I did listen to the committee minutes, were related to linking the superintendent's salary to student outcomes and achievement. I know that there are many disputes around how to evaluate teacher performance, whether that should be on leading or lagging indicators. But I feel that to add context to this conversation, I wanted to present that history, and I'll leave it at that. And Jim, you're the only other person that's been on the board longer than I, so please correct me if I said anything that was wrong.
You were spot on.
I
Robin,
like hearing that. Thank you. Yeah, Rebecca?
No, it's Anne Marie, actually.
Oh.
I'd just like to verify I have the motion correct in my notes here. Jim, can you correct me if I did something wrong here? But you have moved to enter into a contract for calendar years 2020 through 2022 as per the percentage increases noted in memo 100 for a 1.6% salary increase and a 2.0 salary increase for a 2-year contract.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also think it's important to note that Rupak was concerned with his percentage of increase being a little bit disproportionate to staff. And so I would welcome any comments from Dr. Gandhi at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Robin. I think there's just a couple of things that I want to clarify here. I normally would just remain quiet during this discussion, and I'm very happy to be part of Fargo Public Schools and continue my employment here, but I think there were some things that were misrepresentative of what I said, so I do want to clarify that. I never asked for a 3 or 4 year contract, and I never came into the committee, my discussion with the ad hoc committee, with any set terms that I expected, and I would hope that the other members of the ad hoc committee can say that. I think if you listen to the minutes, I don't think you'll ever hear me say I want a 4-year contract. Questions were asked to me of what are things that I'm proud of in our district, which I alluded to our staff and being able to work with capable staff. And they were asked of me of what is my expectation moving forward. And what I communicated at that moment is that for me personally, being someone that had the privilege of entering a superintendency at a younger age, knowing that the average superintendency for someone in a district our size is not a long tenure, my fear is long-term security for myself and my family. And I think that was the communication I had. By that, I don't know how that got translated into give me a 4-year contract. I don't feel like I'm in a position to make a demand of the board. So I just want to make that very clear that I had talked about what I look for. The second things that I said that I do look for were some sort of standardization on how is this decision made. Currently, our structure is set up for year after year, the ad hoc committee to meet with the superintendent and discuss the terms of their contract. And I said, while I appreciate that structure, I don't want a change in superintendent attitude or whoever's an ad hoc committee. There should be, if we can find a way to standardize what is it that we're going to use to make this determination, I think that would be an important part of the conversation. And I said that for a couple of reasons. One is, do we want to be in a district where a superintendent salary is negotiated year after year for PR purposes? But then secondly, it shouldn't be in a subjective position that would allow the superintendent or board members that are coming off of a controversial decision or one thing to influence what they think should be in the terms of the contract. So I just said that if we can start talking about what are the factors that we go into making this determination, that would be important. And I think that went the line of, well, we should look at a pay for performance model based on student achievement. And I think I pushed back on that. And I think I said that to me, that would be unfair to put the superintendent in that position if the superintendent does not have the ability to hold all other staff members to the same accountable standards. And secondly, we don't have complete authority over the budget, which the board does, because we don't have the authority to reallocate resources to some level. And I said, and I did talk about a lot of concerns with just a pay for performance model coming from my previous role. I'm able to talk to that. So I think that was where my pushback on that was. But I do want to clarify that I never asked for certain terms. The money attached to the salary, I never gave a percentage in terms of what I'm looking for. And I know that if you listen to the minutes, you'll never hear that. It is a concern for me that I don't want to be the type of leader that gets a higher percentage than the staff year after year. And I think that compounds at a higher rate. So I do appreciate the work that our staff does. And I think that was an important concern that I had shared as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. I am very happy to work in Fargo Public Schools. I appreciate my relationship with the board, but I just wanted to clarify what was presented.
Robin?
Thank you. Yes, Rebecca and then Jennifer.
Well, I would appreciate hearing from, additionally Jennifer, but Christy and John also serving on the committee, please.
Yeah. Okay, so two follow-ups to that is, I didn't mean to imply, Rupak, that you asked for 3 or 4. I believe the way that you stated it was you were satisfied with the current contract, and you then shared what things rise to the top in terms of what's important to you. And so when I asked those things of you, these were your answers, that you would be okay with a 3 or 4 year contract. In no way did I mean that you demanded it. And so I didn't mean to put you on the defense there, but would you agree that is something that you said?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would be opposed to that.
Okay. And so when we talk about, you talked about you were young and long-term sustainability was important to you. I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that. And I don't think you were out of line with putting it out there. And I never felt like it was a demand. I felt like it was we asked you what things you would look at that would be something you would maybe change. And that was one of them that you shared. To the subjectivity piece, when you talked about having sort of defined measurables, the reason student achievement was talked about back and forth was, and again, it was because, and I tried to be clear in that I'm talking about as a board and as a district whose mission is educating children. Our goal is always going to be improved student achievement. And I went on to clarify, I don't mean for you to put a number on it, but I do wonder when we're talking about a strategic plan that also has goals related specifically to how we're going to increase student achievement. Those are the types of things that our measurables without using a number, but are we directionally moving? Are we making gains? Are the children making gains? And that was the point. I think there was a time, and there are other districts that also look at that way, but I don't understand if there's no accountability measures, how you ever have a conversation about what's working and what isn't, where some deficiencies might be, how do we course correct? So if we're not paying attention to those very important things, which ultimately the only reason we're all here is for our students and the staff and to make things better, I'm puzzled as to why that is something that gets such extreme pushback on.
Point of order, Robin.
Point of order. Yeah, thank you.
I have a motion on the floor, and I really think the conversation has to be germane to that motion until that motion's been dealt with.
Agreed.
Robin?
Agreed. I've got Christy and then David Paulson, please. Christy?
Yeah, Rebecca asked to hear from us, just as we spoke of the contract, and as you've stated, Jim, a 2-year for 1.6, 2.0, we have a current contract in place. We made the determination that he would be frozen in the 1920 contract period. So we were not going to pay him back pay for this current contract year. As we discussed, we could have done that, made it an increase this year and next year. We chose to freeze the current year, and then moving forward, 1.6 is a cost of living increase as of today, and the 2.0 was an increase on that. So to the motion, I think the 2-year contract at 1.6 and 2.0 would be very favorable. And I think Rupak did not ask for those things. I was the one that first suggested those numbers. So he did not come to the table with a preconceived notion of what he was looking for. It was our job as the ad hoc committee to come forth with those numbers.
And I would concur that typically the ad hoc committee is charged with basically coming up with the superintendent's raise. And I will say that unanimously, the board supports the job that Rupak is doing. And I cannot stress that enough. John, you were also asked a question as a committee member. Would you like to say anything?
Yes, I would just, I agree with what Christy said. I don't think I need to repeat that. And that I believe Rupak was really indicating that he's going to accept and respect whatever the board decides tonight.
Question.
Okay, I've got David and then Brian.
Thank you. I'd like to just clarify a point of Jim's motion, and then I have a follow-up question. The second year would go past the current legislative biennium, would it not?
Yes.
Then my follow-up concern is that I'm afraid of the precedent we might be setting for negotiations which occur in that next session, because it's kind of been pretty closely followed that whatever percentage the teachers agree upon is the percentage that's offered to the classified staff and the administration. And particularly with today's economic climate, I have absolutely no idea in the world what the legislature or Governor Burgum, for that matter, is going to be proposing in the next session. He asked the different branches of state government to take a 10% cut, which he's never given to education, thank the Lord. But if that were to be the situation that North Dakota was faced with in the upcoming biennium, and we received significantly less in foundation aid than we've been getting, we could be in a very serious dilemma as when it comes to being able to meet our salary demands. And if the teachers see that we've already given the superintendent a 2%, you certainly doesn't take a whole lot of speculation to figure where they think they're going to be. That's my concern. I have no problem with offering them a 2-year contract. I do have a concern with putting a dollar figure on that second year at this time until we know what the legislature is going to be offering.
Okay, before I call in Brian, I have to say that the past practice was to give the superintendent a raise that was added to basically to the salary, or I'm sorry, the budget line for educators. So I think we added 3 and 3.4 to teacher salaries. And I know how this is messaged is delicate, but in the past, RUPOC would have been given a 3 and a 3.4. Correct me if I'm wrong, negotiations committee. And this is significantly less than that. And so I just want to clarify that, because I think that's very important, not based upon what we're doing now, but based upon the past. That's what those raises were based upon. So Jim, did you have something? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to tell you, you'd captured that correctly. He would have been getting a 3% for this year that he was frozen, and about a 3.4% for the year that we're recommending 1.6. And to David's point, I get the fact the legislature may end up freezing us or even reducing us, but that increase in the second year that I'm talking about is $4,300, which I'm pretty sure we'll be able to find a way to come up with those dollars to keep a superstar like RUPOC that we have.
Okay, I see Jackie's hand, and I've got Brian and then John. Brian?
Yeah, can I just quick tell you the actual percentages came out to be 3.55 for the current year and 3.14 for next year. Just so we have those.
Correction. Okay, Brian and then John.
My question was for the ad hoc committee, did you guys consult Jackie when you came up with this recommendation?
I see shakes of head.
No,
Christy?
we did not. Brian, in the past, I chaired it last year and we had individual conversations ahead of time. This year, when Jen chaired it, we chose to have all of us meet together at the same time. So there was no pre-meetings with Jackie or RUPOC or anyone.
Okay, John?
I would say that part of the lower percentage was tied to the discussion of the term of the contract. And that would be part of the consideration, was that it would be a longer contract, but lower percentage of increase.
Okay,
Can
And
I
so
ask?
that is where the 3-year term came from.
okay. Thanks, John. Jennifer?
Yes, okay, so back to what you were saying, Robin, about in the past, and how that would translate today to 3.55 and 3.14. How, if it's followed negotiations, are you saying then it hasn't matched what's been added to the base? Because that, in my mind, was what was negotiated, right? What was added to the base. The result is what's already on the matrix.
Good. Jim, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, we always looked at what was for the percentage of increase in salary, because the base number is a misnomer. It goes through a multiplier, and there's not a multiplier in RUPOC's contract for it to go through. So theoretically, if we had done things this year as we'd done them in the past, he would have had a 3.55 increase or more, because there have been occasions where the superintendent was actually bumped up even more, because quite frankly, we got to compete to keep a superintendent with districts that might be attracting them. And if you looked at the data that was given out, of the large school districts in North Dakota, I could be wrong, I think we have the lowest paid superintendent, who I might add is the shining star according to everybody in Bismarck.
Okay, I'll share that information because.
Okay, hold on, Jennifer, hold on.
Yeah.
I've got Anne Marie, John, and then Jennifer. Anne Marie?
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to argue with Robin or Jim because I absolutely respect both of you. I would just like to share a little historical information about a superintendent's contract. As the person who for the last 9 years has been the person to update that and get that to you through that ad hoc committee process, I would just like to say that I can't agree with the information being shared that it's the percentage increase is tied to the negotiations process with the teachers. If you recall, Dr. Schatz's contract, he asked it for it to be frozen for the last couple years of his contract. So he did not have a salary increase. Prior to that, the superintendent's contract has included or had included a base pay and then a performance pay. And there were times that the board would raise either side of that portion of that compensation, sometimes both, or either side. So I guess I cannot, and just helping share some historical information for you, I can't agree with the information saying that there's been always a set percentage increase or it's been tied to that teacher contract. I could definitely go back and put all those numbers down for a longer amount of time, but you guys have always worked with the superintendent on that contract. And like Robin said, usually on a yearly basis.
Okay, I've got John.
No, my points have been addressed. Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer.
Okay, so we did have the handout in front of us in terms of comparison, and I did look up North Dakota comparison, and the data shows that currently the pay that we have established for the superintendent is in the top 50%. In terms of North Dakota, 190 in Bismarck, Grand Forks 195. Both of those individuals also have doctorates. West Fargo, 186, I think it says, and then our district 210. And Beth is the only one in those 4 categories listed on here without the doctorate. So we are in North Dakota higher than Grand Forks and Bismarck and West Fargo.
But if I can
Thank you for that clarification, Christy.
I'd like to add something to that. The benefit package, I know West Fargo pays 100% of TFFR. So there are differences in benefits that those schools provide versus what we do. So I think go ahead, Jackie, you can.
Yeah, I would just, because I just completed this for the business managers and set it out for the current year. So for 2020, according to what the business managers filled out, leaving Dr. Gandhi with the same salary would place him number 5 out of the top 10 districts. And I can share that with you. I can't share the screen right now, but I can sure send that to you so you have it.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a recommendation from the committee. Other questions or comments?
Can I just also make one last comment about that in terms of percentages or the comments that were made around him not having an automatic multiplier? Well, kind of the automatic multiplier here is really what surrounded one of the concerns that both the committee had and really, frankly, Dr. Rupak brought it up, was that continuing to add like this on a salary that is higher than our employees increases this salary gap. So by doing it continually like this, that's what will continue to happen. We're not doing anything to address that.
Okay, Rebecca? Yeah.
The memo in front of us says that the committee reached consensus to propose a contract to the board with then the following bullet points. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I know that the motion is different, Jim, what you made, and I still support that, but it appears here based on the memo, at least by the wording, is that the committee reached consensus on these items. Sorry, I have 2 kids and a dog that just arrived home, and I will mute.
To that
Thank you.
point, if I may answer, and then maybe there's someone else that also can add some. I asked about that, Rebecca, too, but because we don't take a vote, there wasn't an opportunity to put it in the memo that it was not unanimous, that it was 2-1. So the only opportunity is to offer that information in a share out.
But I think on that,
Actually, the chair of the committee can institute Robert's Rules of Orders, where you could take a vote. That is in our GPs, but that's obviously a foregone conclusion. Christy?
Right. Oh, thank you.
I was just going to say consensus is the majority of the people on that committee, and it was 2 out of 3 that were in favor of this. Therefore, there is a consensus.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for 2 years. Any other comments or questions?
Robin?
Yes.
I made this motion out of respect to the committee. I'll just go on the record and say, if I had been making it on my own, I would be recommending much more than 1.6 and 2.0. We've got a superstar of a superintendent. We need to keep him as long as we can. And if he's comfortable with these numbers, and at least I got that impression this evening, I think they're very doable for us financially. I think it does address that gap that you're talking about, Jennifer, in that these are less than we're giving out to our rank and file employees. I believe he deserves a 15 to 20% raise, quite frankly, but it's just not in our budget to do it.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion on the floor? Okay, Anne-Marie?
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
No.
Johnson,
Heck, yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
President Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, let's see here, is board reports, 6A, committee liaison and correspondence reports. I'm just going to go at the top of the screen here and move across. And Brandy, you're on the top left, so you go ahead.
Wow, I was supposed to have my last meetings with the schools, but it ended up getting canceled. So I really don't have anything for you guys tonight. I'm so sorry. I know you're disappointed.
Understandable, understandable. Jim,
Since we last had a board meeting, the SEEC had a board meeting where we're still discussing a plan to create a pool of funds that school districts and hopefully in cooperation with multiple districts can apply to tap into some support dollars from SEEK. Hopefully that'll get finalized at our next board meeting and be something available for the coming school year. We also just had a subcommittee sit down to do the evaluation of Kyle Davison, who came out pretty strong. So I think he'll be in good shape for another year as the exec director there. I have had a couple of committee meetings canceled by the city, which I understand they've got plenty on their plate. So the Community Development Committee has postponed itself now out till May. And I think everybody that's on GAC knows that we did not have a meeting this month. Potentially, please keep that second Tuesday in May available for our morning meeting. And as we get closer to that date, I'll touch base with Dr. Gandhi and determine if it really makes sense to hold that meeting. And that's it. Thank you.
thank you. Brian?
No, I haven't had any meetings. I got some coming up on the 22nd of April, but that's it.
Understandable. Rebecca?
Well, similar to Jim, I've had a couple of meetings that have been canceled because they have to do with the city and the response to COVID-19. So the Native American meetings have been canceled until further notice. And then also the work regarding the core neighborhood committee, steering committee is currently not happening. I did share with you all a survey that that group that the city of Fargo is looking for feedback on. So encourage you to participate if you feel that your feedback would be valuable, and share it with whomever you feel it ought to be shared with. And regarding communications committee, I will have to touch base now that we're back and working in Zoom land, touch base with Anne Marie regarding a meeting time, and we'll probably end up sending out some kind of a doodle poll to figure out what works for that group to meet. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Excuse me, like Brandy, I should have been busy. I see I had a lot of meetings that of course hadn't happened. I would just like to take my opportunity to thank the Fargo Public School staff, starting at the top with Dr. Gandhi and all the way down over the incredible job that they're doing in these very, very difficult times. The way that the teachers have stepped up with their online services. And I've got to say this, these brown bag lunches that have been given out it's a godsend, and I'm absolutely amazed because I've talked to kids and they have shared what's in them, and they're not only nutritious, but the kids like them. Dr. Gandhi, everybody's doing a great job, and I just hope that you'll express my thanks from the board for what they've done.
Well said. Thank you. Jennifer Benson?
I'm not on mute. Okay. So yes, my liaison visits similarly were canceled, and I attended negotiations committee via Zoom and ad hoc. We actually practiced social distancing. Let's see, that is coming up. Oh, health insurance. They have rescheduled, and we'll do this meeting via Zoom as well. And it is on the 21st, so next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. John Rodenbiker.
Thank you. Attended the ad hoc committee negotiations last week. I guess we were the first ones to go through this Zoom thing, so that was interesting, and here we are again. There will be a negotiations committee meeting on the 22nd of April at 7:30 a.m. again via Zoom to review the committee's means and purpose. I have also been able to, because of my kids at home, see the fantastic job that the teachers are doing. I have reached out to some of my liaison buildings to get some firsthand reports from, as that way I haven't actually sat in any liaison meetings, but I just have to echo a lot of what I'm also hearing from parents and community members from around the community, that FPS's response to this from the top down, and especially from our teachers adapting to these strange times, has been fantastic. And I did also take advantage of the lunches being provided a couple of days for my kids, and yeah, it was fantastic. You get the lunch, you get the next day's breakfast, great mix of fresh fruits and vegetables and a meal item, and it's been a huge and important lifeline to many in our community. And so that's very much appreciated, in all of the efforts that go into that, and the adaptation for the lunch program, in addition to all of our instructional programs, has been really, really outstanding. So thank you.
Thank you. And Christy Ulrich.
Yeah, I had the ad hoc meeting and the negotiations committee I was listening in on. And I've been checking in with teachers, and I've got a sophomore in high school, and I've been fortunate enough to be working in the same room as him for some of his classes. And I'm really proud of the teachers, and they have done a phenomenal job. And I've been checking in with those teachers, and they've been telling me the good that has happened with it and the response, and very few comments that have not been positive. So I commend all that went to work hard in a short period of time to accomplish what they have done. So good job.
Wonderful. Let's see here. My report is also kind of brief. The committees that I'm on, the Fargo Cass Public Health Board has been exceptionally busy. They have postponed their meeting as well, but we get regular updates from their exec, Desi Fleming. They're right in the middle of this, and so I think the board is, quite frankly, trying to stay out of their way. And as far as the efforts that have been put forth by administration and teachers and everybody, and parents and the kids for that matter, I think it's important that we acknowledge, not only is their curriculum being delivered, but there are a lot of back house items that aren't being thanked as well. The HR and funding is a beast on itself, and I know that just from running a nonprofit on my own. So even the behind the scenes are just as busy and frazzled is maybe the right word, to make sure that we get our employees and our students and our families taken care of. So I want to thank everybody as well. There is some discussion at this point on our next board meeting, clearly, on when we will meet next. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting is on April 28th, but the governance agenda, our meeting is a week from this Thursday. So it's a very, very light agenda, unless the governance committee decides to move those items up that were postponed from tonight's meeting. So please hold August 28th and also May 12th for our next possible meeting. We all need to stay tuned as to what comes down from the state level, from the governor. But I thank you for helping me facilitate this Zoom meeting. Maybe we've had more viewers than we ever had, because I'm sure everybody's watched everything they can on Netflix. So welcome to everybody that is new. With that, I think we've covered everything else on the agenda. So this regular meeting of the Fargo School Board is adjourned. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.